I just take the back seat and let Walt do it all.
No problem. So yeah, I think we could go ahead and call it to order.
All right, I'm calling the Santa Clara Valley Habitat Agency's Public Advisory Committee meeting to order.
Okay, and then I'll go ahead and call the roll. Chair Glines, who's not here, and committee members Lovelace, Wolf, Hintermeister, Ramsden,
Here.
Hutchison,
Here.
Birnbaum,
Here.
Kesh,
Here.
and Brown.
Here.
Thank you. Okay, and Walt is not here, so we could skip the report from the chair. And Julie, you could go ahead and open public comment. Doesn't look.
I am opening public comment. Do we have anyone?
No.
We're missing Doug Muirhead. That's who we're missing.
Yeah.
This cow says moo.
Yeah.
My cat has a comment. So.
Okay.
I'm dying to hear it. So I guess I'll close public comment.
Yes.
All right, public comment closed. And our first item, correct?
Correct.
Take a look at our agenda. I have it here. Let me see. Okay, our first agenda item is the minutes, to approve the minutes of the February 6th, 2020 regular meeting. And before we go ahead and approve the minutes, Angie, one sec here.
Okay.
One really tiny error. It's under number 5.
Mm-hmm.
Ryan Phillips with Talon. You'll see it says provided gave. Just grab one verb, get rid of the other one.
Okay. I got that.
Okay. And do I have anyone who would like to make a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion to approve the minutes with that one modification from Julie. This is Jan.
Yep. Thank you, Jan. A second?
I'll second. This is Rachel.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
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 All right, that's approved unanimously, I believe. There's no abstentions.
Can we
And
just double check that there isn't any no's? Thank you.
okay, second item on our agenda. Let's see here. Again, going back. 5-year review of the Habitat Agency's costs, funding, and development fees. Take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. And we have Bob Spencer here, who worked with Allie Nielsen from House Rath Economics, who put this together. And Bob is going to give you a presentation on his deep dive into our plan and how the cost model is holding up and adjustments that were made based on his analysis. Take it away, Bob.
All right. Do you want to do a screen share and I'll scroll through the slides that are in the agenda packet?
Yeah, that sounds like a good idea.
Does that work?
I have set it to allow screen share.
Okay, then I'm going to share. How's that work to everybody?
Yeah, thank you. We see that.
Good.
Okay. So thank you, Bob Spencer with Urban Economics. We put this together with Sally Nielsen. It took us a good 18 months to gather all the data and pull this together. This is, let me get right into it here. Here's the project overview. This is called for by the plan, a 5-year review of costs, funding, and primary reason, frankly, is to update the development fee schedule, make sure it's on target to fully fund the mitigation share of planned costs. And then overall to look at other funds and ensure that the plan overall is fully funded, what's called funding adequacy in Chapter 9 of the Habitat Plan. So it involves updating the cost model that was used to develop the Habitat Plan. There's a funding model that is based on the cost model that drives what's called the nexus analysis for the mitigation fees. And then we put that all together in a final report that's in your agenda packet that documents the results. So this is for the first 5 years of the plan through fiscal year 2018. The cost model update involved looking at actual revenues, actual activities and expenditures. We made some revisions to some of the cost factors going forward based on this review. We talked to staff about what they've discovered so far in implementation and produced an updated cost model for the entire 50-year permit term, 1 to 5 year actuals and then updated estimates for the remaining 45 years. Here's where the money goes. So this is the 50-year plan. You can see the shares with land acquisition being the greatest, management and monitoring, followed by endowment, wetland restoration, and the other categories. Compared to the original plan, the land acquisition share has gone down a bit. Management and monitoring went up as a result of the cost updates. And there's a larger endowment share because we weren't able to get the endowment invested right away. It took a few years to set up the nonprofit, identify the endowment fund manager, which is the Silicon Valley Community Foundation. So losing a little time there resulted in an increase in the endowment share. So moving to the funding model update, we took all those cost model inputs. We updated the endowment projections. We have this allocation task, which is a real key part of the funding model to the 2 shares of total plan costs, mitigation versus conservation. Out of that, we can calculate the development fee schedules and look at the other revenue sources and put it all together in the final report. Here's where the revenue's going, or coming from, I should say. So development fees are over half of total revenues, and most of that's coming from the land cover fee, followed by the wetland restoration fee. You can see other shares there in the pie chart for state and federal grants, endowment earnings, local foundations, Santa Clara County, etc. You probably are familiar with the endowment fee structure. It's the land cover fee, which covers most of the plan area. Nitrogen deposition fee is a very small fee over the entire plan area. And then you might think of as special habitat fees are on top of both of those for specific special habitats. Here is the recommended fee schedule. We decided because some of the increases were fairly significant, we're going to phase them in. The land cover fee, there's no phase in. It's going up. And this is compared to the fiscal year 1920 fee schedule, which was basically held constant from the last inflationary update, which was done for fiscal year 17-18. The land cover fee is going up by a couple percentage points depending upon the zone. The serpentine fee is actually going down by a hair. Nitrogen deposition fees going up more, but again, that is such a small fee in the scheme of things, it's barely noticed. Now the burring owl fee is going up 5.1%, but that's per year over the next 5 years. The actual total increase is closer to 25%, and that's why we're phasing it in at 5.1% a year. Likewise, the wetland fees, a lot of them are going up significantly. So those first 3, the willow, Central California sycamore, freshwater marsh, and then the pond fee are going up by those amounts in this fiscal year, but then they're going up by the same amounts in the following 3 to 5 years, depending upon the fee. Again, because of significant increases in those fees. The seasonal wetland fee was not going up as much, so there's no phase in there. And the stream fee actually went down, so there's no phase in there. And when I say phasing in, these phase-ins are locked in, and the inflationary increase will be on top of these phase-ins, because that's the annual adjustment that needs to occur every year. So these fees will be going up significantly. again, I didn't address this in my discussion of costs, but we found that the restoration costs for the special habitats were just wetland restoration costs in these specific areas were just much higher than we originally assumed in the for adoption of the plan and based on actual projects that the Conservancy has been engaged in. And actually, we've seen these kinds of increases across other habitat plans we've worked in Northern California. So some of the key recommendations, there has been no enrollment of open space lands to date, and the plan assumes there'll be enrollment of upwards of 13,000 acres. So that would be of lands from the Santa Clara Valley Open Space Trust and Santa Clara County Parks and Recreation. So we're encouraging the Conservancy to encourage those agencies to comply or fulfill their commitments under the plan. There have been, in terms of land dedication in lieu of fees, several of the partners, local partners, have had covered activities under the plan and have not paid fees under the assumption that they would dedicate land. And this was all assumed in the adoption of the plan, and it's in Chapter 9 of the plan, so there's no secret here. But of the 1.5 million in fee credits that have been granted through fiscal year 18, that equals about 223 acres, and there haven't been any acres dedicated to date. So that's another call for local partners to fulfill their commitments under the plan. Because of the high variability in wetland restoration costs, I should say it's not just that they've gone up, but they just are all over the map on a per acre basis. So we're encouraging a more diligent annual review of those to make sure that the plan remains fully funded with regards to wetland restoration. The burrowing owl fee also is going up significantly. You're probably familiar with the challenges of the whole burrowing owl recovery plan. So we're recommending an annual review there, over and above the inflationary adjustment. And then tracking number 5 here on the list, tracking other funding sources. The state and federal and local foundation sources have been keeping up with land development under the plan, sort of share of the allowable take under the plan. These non-mitigation fee funding sources have been keeping up with mitigation fees. Santa Clara County is also has a commitment under the plan, given its long history, Santa Clara County Parks of raising funds for open space. So it's nothing new for them, but they do have a specific commitment under the plan, and that they haven't funded any of that commitment to date. So we're encouraging the Conservancy to keep track of Santa Clara County's commitment here and encourage them to fulfill that, begin fulfilling that. We're upping the contribution to the endowment to about 25% of fee revenues because of the fact we fell behind a bit in the first few years. And we did a small revision to the land cost inflation index, simply to bring it more in line with actual experience. The index we use, we're proposing using an agriculture land index in that case. So that's it, and open to any questions and comments, and I will stop sharing the screen. Although I can go back to the slides if you have any questions.
So do any of our members have questions for Rob?
It looks like Jan has his hand up.
Yes. Can you hear me? I think I am muted.
Yes.
Yeah. So I have a question about this recommendation about encouraging land dedication. I want to make sure I understand that, because this sounds to me like it's getting kind of ridiculous. We're 5 years into this plan, and we haven't collected any fees because of the promise of land, and land hasn't appeared. Is that, I thought on the report I only saw the county referred to, but are there other public agencies that are in the same situation as the county?
I could look back in the report, Jim. I'm sorry, is it Josh? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
It's primarily the county. The city of San Jose has a small amount of that 1.5 million, but I would say, I'm guessing it's 90% the county. And
No.
I don't know, Edmund, maybe you want to
Sure.
on where we are on getting that commitment fulfilled.
Sure. With the city of San Jose, it's the regional wastewater facility, Jan, and it has to do with the burrowing owls in their buffer lands in North San Jose. They've had a couple projects that fees were, I wouldn't say they were waived, but there was land in lieu of fees, and we've been in a protracted discussion with them about putting the easement over 75 acres of that 100-acre area. We actually, Jerry and I worked on a letter that we were going to send out probably this week saying we can't reach a resolution on this, then they owe us 1.2 million or whatever. That the county is a little trickier because they're baked into the plan, as Bob was saying. But the good news is we finally came to an agreement on the language of the easement. We, County Parks, put together a management plan, and I submitted it to the wildlife agencies, I think on Monday, for their review. So things are finally moving forward, and that's for Calero, and that would be around 2,700 acres. So we'll hopefully by this time next year, we'll be completely out of that hole in terms of land and money.
And I'm sorry,
Oh, go ahead.
one quick thing, I misspoke, actually. The county is only about 500,000 of that 1.5 million. The city is actually the big credit holder right now, about $1 million in credits. So it's really more the city than the county. Yeah, I'm sorry, go ahead.
And if you factor in what's happened till today, it's actually higher than that, because this is Bob's analysis stopped with fiscal year 18. Thank you, 18-19. Yeah.
Because I'm sure nobody really cares what I think because I don't have any, power. But, I would just encourage us to be really aggressive about this. I mean, we wouldn't let a private developer do this, just to waive the fees and we'll pay you 5 years from now. And I think that's kind of the analogous situation, correct? Is we're just, there are fees.
Right? It's Wimpy from Popeye. I'll gladly pay you for a hamburger.
Well, and that's what it sounds like to me. And I understand we want to be collegial with our kind of fellow government agencies, but after 5 years, this is getting it seems like it's, gone beyond where it should be really allowed to.
What is the
continue.
holdup in the process? And is there a backstop?
The bureaucracies of our fellow organizations and their reluctance to have some sort of encumbrance placed over their lands.
Oh, are they more or less reluctant to pay money then?
Their elected leaders are less wanting to pay the money, Rachel. So, right, we had a meeting with Wasserman and Smidian about this, and that did help. And then the county, with the county, I think we're in a good place finally. But Jan's right; it took way too long. The city, like I said, they're gonna fish or cut bait. They need to accept the easement template. Stop messing around with it. Stop wasting our time. Stop wasting the time of the wildlife agencies, or just accept it. This is what your Mayor Reed and the council at the time agreed to. And if you can't do that, then you owe us 1.2 million or thereabouts.
And of course, they won't want to hear that now, given everything that's changed.
Right.
COVID.
Yeah.
But what leverage do we have to say, look, you just need to do this? This is completely independent of COVID. We're talking about land exchanges, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So the real estate people can work from home, and so can the lawyers just as well as anyone else.
Yeah, the part of the problem with both organizations was their legal teams. The county changed attorneys, and that made a world of difference. The attorney who we're now working with is great, and things started to move. I think Don Rocha becoming the director really helped. and things change dramatically there. The city, it's not the RWA staff or RWF staff. It's more the attorneys and fear of lawsuits and the language in the easement talks about third-party beneficiaries having a right to make sure that both us and them are abiding by the terms of the easement. And the third-party beneficiaries are the wildlife agencies, and they don't like outside entities coming in and checking up on them. And we keep telling them, this is the way it is. We're buying something from you. This is the transaction. You don't have to pay fees. It's a barter transaction, I guess you could call it. But it is an exchange of values, and they're struggling with it. We're at our wits' end with them, and so by this time next year, I think the Calera will be enrolled in the reserve system. Part of Grant Park should be, and there'll be a couple other properties hopefully soon after that. And the
In
city,
terms of lesson learned, oh,
yeah,
sorry.
yeah,
In
yeah,
terms of lesson learned, is there a backstop provision as far as timing where deadlines are written in, or interest because money?
right,
Or your fees in this protracted negotiation. Because
right.
every day that passes that you have to continue working on this takes money out of the coffer and detracts from your ability to do conservation work.
Exactly. And RWF had another project, and we told them, no, you're paying us fees. Sorry. So we aren't going to listen to empty promises any longer. And if for some reason this Calero thing goes sideways, that's what we'll be doing with the county. Any projects going forward will have to pay fees. So.
And interestingly, the demand to pay fees now for this most recent project, which was a pretty big one for the regional water facility, suddenly woke up the city, and we're on negotiations, maybe even fast track negotiations with them. So this stopped being fun a couple of years ago, Ed knows, and through these collaborations, we'll eventually get there. We've learned a lot about dealing with our co-committees in this regard, land in lieu agreements coming forward or going forward. Probably going to have some language about timelines and sunrises and sunsets and things like that.
Leverage, liquidated damages, your billable time, all that fun stuff.
Totally.
A lot of billable time.
Totally. I agree with Rachel.
Yeah.
And
Another thing,
damages, pain and suffering.
He wants to do a similar thing, and we're saying, no, you got to pay us.
another thing is just,
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
just a reality check on the actual third-party enforcement action. I mean, you can search for case law. The number of times that a resource agency has actually asserted itself are probably very, very little. I mean, the ability of the resource agencies to check up on all of their conservation easements and mitigation easements throughout the state of California has got to be close to nothing.
Would have to be truly egregious. Someone comes in and dumps concrete everywhere on purpose.
Or
and
builds a shopping mall in your wetland.
And then somebody would have to complain and sue on their behalf for it to actually happen. Like, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's next to nothing. It's surprising to me that they would point to that as a reason to hold up this negotiation when anyone who has any experience in this world knows that it's a non-thing.
I think you're right, and you have more experience with this than I do, so I'm trusting what you're saying. With county parks, it's the public access restrictions that make them nervous. Yeah, and having to come to us for permission to do something that's not enshrined in the easement. With the city, it's the silliness that you just described. Yeah.
For the areas that have potential public access conflicts, can you do zoned easement where you specify certain areas that are open to public access and others that are prohibited or limited, so they know that? Okay, good.
Yes. Yeah. And if they want to move a trail or put in a new trail, they have to get approval from us and the wildlife agencies to do that.
Maybe you could, if they know that they have to move some trails or that there are some areas where there are potential problems, if you can give them flexibility within designated areas so they know in advance that certain things are allowable, upon notice or or pre-approved, maybe that could help. Like you can get pretty detailed in how you
Yeah.
map it out.
Yeah, we have an allowable use section and then a process for if there's something that deviates from that.
It sounds like you're doing all the right things.
I think.
I guess the one thing I wanted to kind of follow up on that is, is there something that we as a body could do in terms of like drafting a letter to like our own implementing board or our own governing board? I mean, we are a public advisory committee.
Mhm.
And, I think any member of the public that saw this would not be very happy, because on the face of it, it looks like we have other public agencies just not acting in good faith, when it goes on for as long as it has. And so if there's something that we should do as a body in terms of, a letter or something like that, then maybe we should consider that if this doesn't get resolved really quickly. I like what you're saying about just kind of, not, holding back on this option in the future if they're not going to, be able to follow through in a timely manner.
Yeah, I would encourage you to, it's part of your function to advise the two governing boards. And if you as a group, as a committee, view this as something that you feel you need to advise both the implementation board and the governing board on, I would, I can't encourage or discourage you from doing it.
Mm.
But I think it's within your purview to do something like that.
Mm.
So just to weigh in a little bit on this, Jan, you sort of picked up on an idea that was in my head, which is simple public shaming. First of all, San Jose, for San Jose, that is right now, they're holding up Coyote Valley and saying, look what we've done. And it's great and it's wonderful. But it took, $50 million on the part of the taxpayers to get that done. Here is just a question of them handing over some land, right? that it's not a big deal for them to do. And it really, one of the questions I had, which was sort of maybe related to this, but it was on the report, page 2, it was a second bullet where it says the pace of enrollment will affect total costs for management and maintenance and may present future habitat permit compliance challenges. I was just a little curious about, and goes also to the annual report about staying ahead provision. I mean, are they holding us up in terms of us getting that done? I think that's something else that can be put out there publicly. If need be, we have San Jose representation on our governing board, correct? And implementation board on both. So there's no reason to start that pressure first. And if they don't want to move, nice op-ed wouldn't hurt. We've got a lot of good things to say, and then we have some stuff where we can point a finger as well if you're really not going to budge after all these years. So I think that's also an option, because you guys have done a lot of work, and this is partly taxpayer dollars, and there was a lot of folks that didn't say this plan would fly. And so these agencies really wanted this to happen, so it's time for them to pony up and do their part. So that's just sort of my 2 cents on this piece of it.
Here.
With regards to the comment I just made with regards to the report, is that in terms of, are you expecting, because of what's coming in 2020 with the acquisitions you've had and a potential with where funding may go, I'm just wondering where that balance is. And the other piece that I wanted to just say I'm very pleased to see is the increase in the endowment. I think, as we were developing this plan, and then as we were hearing from others in the development on their plans, making sure your endowment was well endowed was really important. It's something that a lot of the plans that were put in place cried about, and it was something that some people had a real concern about as we ink this deal. So I'm really happy we're staying on top of that, especially with the downturn we may see. I think that's extremely important because, again, we have to remember we've only got so many years left, and then we've got to do it in perpetuity. The endowment is incredibly important. Just my 2 cents there.
Thank
Anybody else that had any questions or comments with regards to this?
I'm just wondering what are the specific next steps as far as getting movement with the city? You mentioned a couple, Julie, recommendations, but do we
Yeah,
have?
well, I think that maybe just if we agree as an advisory committee, when is the next implementation or governing body meeting?
September 16th, 17th, something like that.
Okay, so I would say that, I'm assuming Walt will bring this to them, or whoever does the report out, or if it gets to be me who has to do the report out from the PAC. But I think that's something we can completely raise, is that we have real concern and we think it's high time that we see some serious movement and commitment on the part of those two agencies to make sure that this plan lives up to what they have signed up for. So I can do that as a first step and sort of put a time limit on it of, we by the time of our next public advisory committee, we want to hear good news coming back. We want to know that there's some serious movement happening, and because at that point in time, maybe the advisory committee will talk about what a next step may be. And at that point, that's where maybe we can come back and discuss about more public shaming in the sense of maybe getting an op-ed out. It can be both a positive, and negative, you could say, op-ed, because I think we'll get to this issue, but when we talk about the annual report, but we are now 6 years in, there's a lot to, there's things to celebrate, there's things to talk about, and this was, at the time, pretty widespread discussion on this, but yet now we're not celebrating the wins, and maybe it's time we get out there, maybe as an advisory committee, and do that a little bit. But I'll leave that to the next. I'll leave that to that item. So is everybody in agreement that for the implementation committee board, is that the one?
Yeah, it's a joint meeting. So
A joint, perfect. Couldn't
Yes.
ask more.
For sure. I think that that's very much within our purview and really important and frankly embarrassing that the co-permittees are the ones who are holding up implementation and success of the plan. And especially given the real estate situation as we move forward in a very different world, we can't rely on, I don't know. It is a question whether the fee revenue will continue apace. So to have the plan be hamstrung by a simple transfer of a partial interest in land by friendly neighboring agencies who are co-permittees and beneficiaries of the plan, it's embarrassing. And it shouldn't be allowed to continue.
Yeah, no, exactly. So thank you. Anybody else? Any last comments?
Well, yeah, I guess my question would be, so if we want, say, Walt to talk to this at the next, at the September meeting, do we want to have a motion? We haven't done this before, but should we have a motion? Otherwise, we can't talk to Walt without violating the Brown Act.
Yeah, I think you're right. Yeah, John, that's what I was going to suggest, that there needs to be kind of a vote up or down on what the comments are that are going to be submitted. And I don't know that that can be done before the September meeting. So my recommendation is that if you want to consider this, you come back next PAC meeting, talk about it, come up with a letter, draft a letter, take a vote on it, and then that can be presented after that.
Okay, but could not, as part of the report out, he be able to say that at least the committee has expressed concern?
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
That's fine.
yes, you can report out and you could make a recommendation that the governing board and implementation board look into it.
Okay, so do we require a vote here for that kind of a recommendation? Because this was, I believe, an informational item, right? This is just receiving the report.
Yeah, I would defer to Angie on that. Valerie's not here, so don't know the nuances of Robert's rules or the Brown Act in terms of how, but I think as part of your, at every board meeting, the chairs of, I think Wasserman is the chair. So he would, he always asks for, is there any public comment? And then he always asks, is there a report from the PAC? So that there's a process for that. And what you're saying is that, yeah, you want Walt or you, Julie, or somebody to present at the joint meeting that you have these concerns. And you're going to ask the governing board and the implementation board to look into it. And I don't think you necessarily have to do a vote on it, but I would defer to Angie.
I think we could just reflect that you agreed to go to the next meeting, which is September 17th, and it's a joint meeting, and you could do that under the report from the PAC.
All right, so we can
Just
just,
reflect it on the minutes.
good, great. So then that's what Walt can do.
So I want to make
We could
sure
also
that
make
we-
public comment.
Yes,
Yes.
you're all more than welcome to join.
But I'd like to see in the minutes then that we're specifically what we're talking about is addressing the failure of our participating jurisdictions to address the land dedication in lieu of fees issue that's identified in the report that we just went through.
Yeah, and it also, Jan, it's also, they're supposed to enroll land for conservation purposes too. So for the NCCP portion of it. So it's not just for direct mitigation. They're also supposed to contribute towards conservation. And that has not been done.
Yeah, it's two components, the land in lieu, as Edmund said, and then the land conservation over and above any in lieu dedication is a county commitment only. So the local partners up to now, it's just been San Jose and Santa Clara County owe land in lieu. And then in addition, the county owes, well, I don't have the acres right in front of me, but I can get them, a chunk of land.
Yeah.
Thousands of acres, in addition to any in lieu requirement. So both of those need to start being fulfilled to stay on track.
Yeah, I think when you add the two together, it's, and Bob and I can look into this, I think it's 18 or 19,000 acres when you put the two together.
Wow. Has the Open Space Authority followed through on its commitment to dedicate land
No.
into the?
That's right. That's a third entity. Yeah, the Open Space Authority and the county were the two that were expected to transfer land into the reserve.
The one thing is OSA is not a co-permittee, so it's a different relationship, but no, they haven't done it either.
So would we, as far as the report goes and amongst our purview, want to have some type of a motion that we express our concerns about our partners and or fellow agencies that about their timeliness, because they would be saying, oh, we're working through the process, and recommendation to the governing board that they adopt specific timelines, and that we receive that back at our next quarterly meeting? Is that an appropriate way to go about that? And that we motion that concern be brought forward? Is that the parliamentary way we're supposed to do that?
Again, I'll ask Angie, but as far as reporting to the board, you can just do that. But I think Jerry's correct. If you want to agree on a letter, that could be agendized for the next meeting. But you could probably do a motion now, but I'll defer to Angie that you want to do that at the next meeting, I think, but I'll ask Angie.
Yeah, so that's more of a legal question, but I mean, if you want to make the motion, we could at least do that to formalize it in the minutes. And then under future business at the end of the meeting, you could always ask for the future item that you would like to be on the next agenda. But as far as like taking a letter that you're all agreeing on, it's good to have that on a future agenda to draft it and for everyone to agree that that is what you would like to submit.
Can I just suggest that first we do the report out. We give them an opportunity to respond, to do something in good faith. And what we can maybe ask as a future agenda item is to get a report back on this with the option of discussing next steps, of discussing potential options if we don't see satisfactory movement forward on this issue. I don't want to pile too hard right away. There seems to be at least a little bit of movement. If they see that we're watching them and we're asking this and we have expressed concerns, hopefully that will help with nudging it along before, like I said, we take that hammer. So is that all right with everybody, or does people prefer to hold out the hammer now?
I'm a hammer person, but Julie, I think that is a better approach. I mean, this is a procedural body, and I think we should honor the process.
I was trying to.
But I'm mad.
I'm with you. I am with you because it's been a long time, Ed. I know you have been at this. We've heard you meeting after meeting talking about your frustrations with county, trying to keep it under a lid. But in the last couple of meetings, it's been obvious that you're getting very tired of this, and rightfully so. And of course, for the city of San Jose, this too. It's the same thing
there's a cost. I mean, you have limited staff. Every hour that you spend on this instead of on conservation or on building the reserve through transactions and exploration and relationships with landowners and partners is a cost. I mean, they're double charging you, not only the cost of what the time it takes to continue these negotiations, but the lost time that you do not have to devote to other things that are also important to plan implementation.
Yeah, it takes a lot of my time, Valerie's time, the attorney, and it also involves some of Jerry's time. So there is a cost, opportunity cost of us doing something else, and it's frustrating, as you both said. I told them last meeting with the wildlife agencies, I don't want them wasting our time anymore. So Jerry worked on a letter. I edited it. It'll probably go out early next week, telling them you either need to agree to what everybody agreed to, or just write us a check. I think if they balk at either option, then Julie's discussion about the PAC becoming more involved probably makes a lot of sense.
And if I could just quickly, if you guys have a moment, I can show you where in the report the data is, if you ever want to refer to the numbers in this regard, like how far behind they are. Would that be of interest? I can do it in just a second, give you a couple tables. Here, let me.
Is that something the members
Yeah,
would?
interested.
Yes, please.
Okay, please go ahead, Bob. Thank you.
Okay, so this is table 8.2 in the report, and this shows progress towards meeting funding targets. So as a benchmark, the top is the development fees, and we've included Santa Clara County's feed credits because they're included in that calculation. But the focus on the 5.7%. So if you want to think about it, after 5 years, we're 5.7% of the way through the take allowed under the permit. That's a way of gauging where you are in getting your other funding on board. State and federal grants are actually ahead of the game. They're 7.1% of their funding target compared to development fees. Here's the local foundations and land trusts. They're a bit behind at that point, but I think, Edmund, you've got some grants that have come in the last 2 years that have probably brought them up.
Yes. Yeah, that'll turn around with the acquisition of another 1,500 acres at UTC, Tilton. So that'll look very different next year.
But the real laggard here is Santa Clara County. That 530,000 at the bottom, that's their land dedication credit to date, they have a $45 million commitment under this plan, of which, you know, was supposed to be provided substantially through, you know, enrolling land in the reserve system. So they barely scratched the surface of where they need to be, and compared to the 5.7, not far along at all. And then the only other table I'll turn your attention to is table 8.3, and this shows the land, the fee credit in lieu of land, where you have the county and the city, and we estimate how many acres they need to have dedicated based on the average cost per acre to meet those commitments. So 8.2 and 8.3 in the plan, those tables can give you the numbers if you want to refer to them in any public comments.
All right, thank you, Bob. So I believe we have agreement on how to move forward with this. Correct? Good. Are we done with this item now? Any further comments? And I believe we don't need to open up public comment for this item since we don't have any.
Correct.
All right, so let's move on
Thanks,
to
everybody.
our, thank
Thanks,
you.
Bob.
Thank you.
Bye.
All right, we'll move on to our next agenda item, which is review of the fiscal year 2021 and the operating budget.
Yep. Thank you, Julie. So I'm having some problems with my S drive where all our documents are stored, so I won't be able to share any documents with you, but I can definitely go over the report and just highlight some of our thinking related to where we are and where we think we're going to be. So this is we did a 2-year budget. So this is the second year of the 2-year budget that was adopted by the governing board last June. So we made some modifications to that budget, and the modifications reflect that we just doubled the size of the reserve system, which is not reflective in Bob's report because all the land transactions happened after last June. And there's several more land transactions that are going to be happening this fiscal year. So we doubled the size of the reserve system from last June, and we're going to double it again this year. And so we did some shifting around of our budget priorities. So more of our budget is going to go into land management activities than we originally thought would be necessary. And some money has been pulled out of restoration because some projects are taking longer than we thought they would. So the can is just getting kicked down the road on that. But the takeaway is that we'll be spending $576,303 less in this fiscal year than we originally thought in last fiscal year. So there were a lot of projects that we said, no, we're going to put these on hold there. And we rethought our budget and what our priorities would be. So we went from, more focused on restoration and research to now being more focused on land management, given all the acres. We've added 2 staff people, Julie King and Will Spangler. Oh, I see Jerry. Is there something wrong, Jerry?
I was just pumping my fist. I'm so happy.
Oh, okay. I said, am I on mute? Have I been talking?
You're doing great, Ed. You're doing great.
The joys of Zoom. So Julie comes from the Catalina Island Conservancy, and Will comes from H.T. Harvey. He worked here locally, and both of them bring expertise in restoration ecology, land management, and biology that was lacking. And both of them are going to be assigned to overseeing our restoration projects and land management activities and overseeing a lot of the research that's been going on. As you all know, Tara moved on. Tara had a lot of the similar skills that Jerry and I have. So the fact that, with Tara leaving, that wasn't a great thing, but it allowed us an opportunity to bring in 2 new individuals who are more focused on those land management activities. And for Jess's knowledge here, all the properties that we currently have, there will be grazing on them. So we'll be working with local ranchers to graze every property that we currently have acquired or will have an easement over it. Well, something, happened to all of us sort of on the way to the forum. Things were just chugging along, and something called COVID-19 came along. So it caused us kind of to rethink what is the agency budget situation going to look like in 2 years or 3 years. We have projects in the pipeline, the Pacheco Creek and the Pajaro River restoration that we've already spent money, got grants for, that we need to complete. It would be foolish for us to pull the plug on those right now. But it led me to kind of think about what's our revenues going to be in 3 years from now. And I think in fiscal year 22-23 our budget will be very different than the budget for this fiscal year and the budget for next fiscal year. If revenue projections remain bleak, then the budget being discussed today is going to be very, very different. Sizable outlays embedded in the fiscal year 21 budget and projected for the fiscal year 22 budget reflect one-time expenses associated with new fences and gates, habitat restoration, database development, and the establishment of a in lieu fee program with the U.S. Army Corps for the 404 permitting. These costs will not carry over into fiscal year 23, and if revenues do not rebound in the coming years, the Habitat Agency will not be implementing many of these types of big ticket projects. We will just hunker down with the staff we have, managing what I project to be probably around 10 or 11,000 acres of land. And if Calero happens like I think it is going to happen, then it'll be more like 13,000 acres of land. And our main priority will be enhancements on those lands, managing those lands, and just hoping that it's not an economic depression and it's a deep recession, and that we can ride it out. We're not sure. There's talk of a stimulus bill coming out of the state. There's been talk of a stimulus coming out of Washington. Who as president could really impact how much of a stimulus funding would come to California versus not. If there is a lot of public investment, we could see a lot of public works projects that would be implemented and in fact would pay land cover fees and aquatic impact fees, and those would keep us going until the private economy recovers. Just to give you a little background, the governing, so we, in June of 2019, we projected that revenues from mitigation fees would be approximately $4,075,000. And grant revenues would be $3,550,000. Our revised projections are that we anticipate approximately 2 million in mitigation fees. I'm hoping that's not an overshot on my part. And that we'd have 16 million in grant funding allocation revenue, which is telling us a very different story than back in 2019. And a lot of those grants are coming from the federal and state government, from the Moore Foundation, from Post, and from OSA and other sources to help with the acquisition of the UTC. We call it Coyote Ridge East, which we closed escrow on last month, and the Tilton Ranch. And we're continuously applying for grant funding because we feel that is the future for us right now, given the uncertainty related to fees, unless there are a lot of public works projects that would be coming through and keeping our coffers going. In the EO report, I'll give you a more up-to-date analysis of where we are right now. Currently, we have about $10 million in our local government investment fund, and we have 3.1 million in our JP Morgan Chase general operations account. So if you add the two together, we have about 13,400,000 in monies in our various accounts, and that's not counting the endowment. So we're in pretty good shape, but if this continues, if there's a big fallout, a severe economic decline as a result of this, there is a lot of uncertainty moving forward, and we are thinking about this in a very thoughtful way, and how things will look, not just for this fiscal year, but for the next 3 to 5 fiscal years. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Edmund. I'm opening it up. Does anyone have any questions with regards to the report? No, you were so spellbound.
Yes, yes.
I'm glad you're out in front of it.
Yeah, without any visual aids. Thank you.
I just have one small nitpicky thing about the written report.
Yes.
For Leif, I would say that we should spell it all out.
You are absolutely correct, and I apologize.
Just because I'm thinking about, it's not because I think the public's like rushing all over this document and, you know, is wondering what the heck that stands for, but it's more I'm thinking about new members coming in, reading these reports for this first time, not understanding what these acronyms are. It's like anybody else, you know, and you get into the jargony stuff and just, you forget that other people don't know.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely correct, and I should know better. Jerry and I were scolded for doing that, and we're in Placer County. So.
Appreciate the explanation on the 16 million. That was my other question that you covered.
Yeah, and it's 9.9 for Tilton, 4.5, and that's just from the federal and state government. Then there's Post. So it's 16 million roughly for Tilton, and 4.5 million or 4.3 million for UTC, Coyote Ridge East. And then there's going to be some monies from restoration and possibly a couple smaller land acquisitions. So it's something we had a good beat on, that we already knew that 14, a significant chunk of that is already encumbered, so to speak, you know, Yeah,
I just wanted to sort of compliment the agency in terms of the grants so far that we've received. Looking into your crystal ball, which is pretty murky at this point in time, are you foreseeing some issues with grant funding as things come down the line? And the other question I have, so the water district's going to go forward with their ballot measure. You don't foresee any spot within the grant funding the way we received last time or anything sort of carved out for the Habitat Agency in that. I'm not like, haven't looked all through that ballot measure and, you know, what they've proposed for it.
They, you know, there's different factions within the Valley Water. I know there are some that are really going to bat for us, and we're hoping there's an earmark for us in that. At bare minimum, there'll be monies that we can compete for. Yeah. Hopefully there's a carve out. I'm not sure there will be. That was quite a coup. Whoever made sure that that was in there. I think Deborah Calden was one of the individuals that made sure that was in there. But there had to be some higher ups and possibly board members too that were advocating for that. We already submitted a grant through the WCB for pollinator habitat creation and restoration. And WCB pulled the funding after we submitted the grant. Unfortunately, we spent time putting it together and money. And so I envision more things like that. I think the local assistance program that isn't funded via Prop 68, we're hearing rumblings that the funding for that may evaporate. It's not a lot of money in the state budget, but I think the state's going to be looking to save every penny. And usually it's about 1.5 million a year that's set aside for organizations like ours to apply for funding that helps out with a lot of the research that's been done, research that Pathways and Talon, Ryan Phillips, when he got a LAIF grant through us and the state. So I'm not optimistic that funding will still be there. The Great American Outdoor Act was a good thing for us. And I can talk about a little bit more about that in the EO report. So I think there potentially could be Section 6 funding might be more secure now than it would have been in the past. There's still monies from Prop 68 that are earmarked for NCCPs. There's still some money left. So, but at some point, if this economic downturn lasts beyond these bond initiatives, I could see a significant drying up, at least funding coming from the state, and depending on who's president from the feds.
If we can just get the water district to commit to keeping the open space credit as is, Jess, we'll be good. And does anybody have any other questions or comments? No? Okay, thank you so much, Ed. And I guess we'll move on to, and again, just formally opening and closing public comment since we have no one to make public comment. And on to our next agenda item. This one being the fiscal year 18-19 annual report.
Yeah, give this a shot. Can everyone see? Here. How does that show up on your screens?
Shows up well, thank you.
Okay, looks fantastic.
Oh yeah.
All right, well, thank you, Chair Hutchison, and thank you, members of the PAC, for virtually being here anyway. This is our 5th annual report, which details the agency activity for the reporting year. In this case, it would extend from July 2018 through June 2019. Go and pull these up here. This is a chart that's just showing the number of projects that were covered by the Habitat Plan for each year since plan adoption, basically starting in 2013. The number of projects each year has been kind of surprisingly consistent. It seems to track with the economy on hold. There's no real big dips or swings in the numbers here. For the reporting years, you can see here we had 63 covered projects. Cumulatively, the Habitat Plan has provided coverage for 289 projects since inception, and that has resulted in mitigation for impacts to over 2,400 acres across the plan area. I think it's important to note that twice as much, if you see on the pie chart here, twice as much developed land or infill land has been impacted as has natural lands. And that was a goal to Habitat Plan, to encourage development in urban and suburban areas and to discourage development in the natural landscapes that provide habitat and resources. So there's unfortunately not much we can do about, in the yellow here, the agricultural conversion seems to be a preferred option of developers, usually because it's kind of open and flat land to develop. So it's a little bit easier to get buildings and whatnot on those properties. This is a representative project that was covered during the reporting year. Many projects are quite small, sometimes only paying just nitrogen deposition fees, and others can be quite large, sometimes totaling hundreds of thousands of dollars in mitigation fees, land cover fees. This is a residential subdivision in Gilroy that developed 16 acres of agricultural land that was on the valley floor. Development of our reserve system, as all of you know, specifically 46,000 acres to be enrolled within 50 years is required by our permits. This means that we should be enrolling about a little over 900 acres every year to stay on track. We did jump ahead at the beginning with the enrollment of Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve, but it's been a long and challenging legacy of attempted land acquisition since that time, given Ed a lot of gray hairs over these years trying to pull properties in. Although no new land was enrolled during this reporting year, we have been very busy working with property owners in key locations across the plan area. And I'm happy to report, as Ed has kind of mentioned, that 5 new properties were actually purchased by the Habitat Agency between the end of the reporting year and the beginning of this calendar year. Do you want me to go through the properties that we picked up, or are you all kind of getting more familiar with ones that we've purchased now? I can go through them.
Why don't you just run through those one more time?
Okay. So the properties that we're going to be talking about are these ones that are in gold or yellow, whichever you see, whichever color, maybe mustard. We'll call it mustard. That's a compromise. The first one would be Tulare Hill, which is a 36-acre property, annual grassland. It shows up as number 3. It's barely a speck on here, but it's an important 36 acres. It's in a strategic location that preserves wildlife connectivity. It's also got some serpentine soils on it. Baird Ranch, I guess that's going to be number 7, and it's right down here. That's a 602-acre property, which consists of very high value habitat, including serpentine grassland. Several of our covered plant species are there, and one of only 3 known occurrences of Coyote ceanothus show up on that property. That was a big win for us there. I'm sorry, Baird Ranch. Looks like these numbers are, Baird is this portion here. I'm sorry. 8 is Davidson. So they adjoin each other. Davidson Ranch is 80 acres of annual grassland and serpentine soils adjacent to Baird Ranch to the south of the ranch. And acquisition of this site protects the remaining portion of the Coyote ceanothus occurrence that I was mentioning earlier. Uva South is down here, number 10. Kind of toward the southwest boundary. And this is 347 acres. It's a beautiful piece of property. Extends uphill to the south, I guess kind of southwest of Uvas Dam. It includes varied habitat and very good connectivity actually. This is in the Santa Cruz mountain foothills down here. So it's a really pretty property. Soralo is down here right along the property, the planned boundary with San Benito. That property was 103, or is 103 acres, and includes 1 mile of Pacheco Creek, that's directly upstream from our existing Pacheco Creek Reserve. So it's a good example of kind of expanding our reserve system properties by purchasing adjacent sites. And on that note, I think I'd like to just go ahead and point out what Ed mentioned here. Number 4 is the UTC property, 1,525 acres, that is directly adjacent to our existing Coyote Ridge Open Space Preserve. So, it nearly doubles the size of that reserve system, capturing both sides of the ridge that's over here. So speaking of Pacheco Creek Reserve, I thought it would be worthwhile to talk briefly about what we do with properties that become part of our reserve system. And this is a good example because we've had it a few years now. So we're going to focus on 3 R's here. Sorry, none of them are rest and relaxation. We'll start with restoration. And this property has provided us with opportunities to restore habitat that will benefit many of our covered species. That's because the property is covered with really good habitat that was just mismanaged for decades. The site was a former gravel mining operation, and after the mining stopped, years of neglect and overgrazing of the landscape combined with wildfire and flood events over the years really kind of took its toll on this landscape. In 2017, we completed a riparian restoration project on this property. That's the image that you see here with little staked plants that are coming in. They actually look a little bit better now. That's kind of a dated picture. I apologize for that. So they are coming in well. But that restoration was intended to replace some of the habitat that was either disconnected from the channelized creek or suffered from a change of water availability or was overgrazed for years, which has kind of prevented a lot of the late successional trees and shrubs from taking root on the property. So we're also preparing a feasibility study on this property for a much more robust stream restoration project. And that would be the we're calling it Pacheco Creek Restoration Project because it's actual in-creek work and then riparian work on the outside. The Pacheco Creek Restoration Project is anticipated to begin construction in the fall of 2021. The second R here is research. And you'll see a picture from one of our culverts here of a bobcat and a badger hunting together, or at least not killing each other. So there's some spirit of cooperation right here on the property. This is a photo from Pathways for Wildlife. We have conducted a sycamore genetic study on this property, and that's been instrumental in establishing an understanding of the hybridization of the species across the plan area. And just last year, we completed a wildlife permeability study to assess wildlife movement across and under State Route 152 at Pacheco Pass. In just 1 year with these cameras, we were able to capture and document over 3,000 individual animals moving through box culverts or under bridges in just a few mile stretch of Pacheco Pass. So it's pretty good information to have. We were able to document higher roadkill mortality during rain events with when the culverts and bridges are flooded. And this has led to forthcoming improvements to bridges and undercrossings at the reserve system property, which will reduce the number of animals being killed and also reduce traffic collisions in the area. Kind of a win-win. The final R here is relationships, not necessarily with cows, but they're there. We have good working relationships with the ranchers on both ends of our property, both the upstream and downstream property owners. We've already purchased 100 acres immediately upstream of the reserve from a neighboring property owner. That's the Sorala piece I was telling you about earlier. And we have negotiated plans to purchase other property or conservation easements from neighbors in the vicinity as well. We have the names and phone numbers of several neighbors, and we call each other when there are issues out there on the properties that affect one or more of us. We help each other out. So I'd say most importantly, though, our mission, our purpose, who we are is now being understood by a remote and rural community, really, that who might not ever have heard of us otherwise if we weren't there on the landscape. So with each new land transaction, whether it's a fee title or a conservation easement, the role of the agency, the benefits of having us as neighbors becomes more clear to the public. Pacheco Creek. As I mentioned earlier, we're a little behind in land acquisition. We've been talking about that at length here today, and that's reflected in this slide. Whoops, that's a missing slide here. I'm sorry. No, that is this one. Oh, it's because it's okay, I'm sorry. Got my thoughts together now. During next year's annual report, what you're going to see is a movement of all of these land cover types and species in this red column over to the green column. And we all know that green is the better color of the two. we're going to move into compliance because all 5 of the properties that I mentioned earlier that were purchased just after the end of the reporting year have some of the habitat types that are represented here on them. And the only exception is the burrowing owl habitat for rough proportionality. We were having a struggle finding, let alone buying enough property for burrowing owl nesting habitat, and it's increasingly difficult to keep up with the impacts of that species. But in all other regards, you're going to see us in compliance, grasslands, coastal scrub, oak woodlands, all those categories. Cumulatively, the habitat plan funding is nearly $55 million. Fee funding totals nearly 30 million, and non-fee funding is about 25 million. Non-fee funding, as you can imagine, accounts for mitigation only and voluntary contributions, grants received by the Habitat Agency and its partners, and land acquired by others for the reserve system. This year, the Habitat Agency, this reporting year, excuse me, the Habitat Agency received over $3.8 million in direct fees and $8 million in grants. And you'll notice that our expenses ticked up just a little bit in this reporting year. It's $4 million over the 2 years prior. And that was largely due to the construction of our biggest restoration project to date, the San Felipe Creek Restoration Project in Grant County Park. So are we on track? As of the end of the reporting year, we are 12% of the way through our 50-year permit term. As you can see, we're very close to the estimates for permanent and temporary impacts that were anticipated by the Habitat Plan. And that's a testament to all the people that wrote the plan, relying on general plan build out and the pace of development over the years. They've been largely spot on in that regard. We're a little light in conservation, but as I mentioned earlier, the purchase of those 5 properties after the end of the reporting year, followed by 2 more sizable purchases this year, including UTC. It means that we're soon going to be ahead in compliance. So next year, that column is going to be up over. We still haven't enrolled any county parks. That's why we see 0% existing open space enrollment. And rather than go into detail about that, because we've already talked about it, we'll just kind of move on. Fee funding. And these final 2 columns, 8%, 9%, demonstrate that we're currently not on target to generate all the funding that was envisioned by the plan through the 50-year permit term. We've had a couple of low fee years, low fee funding years, which is one thing, but the lack of the enrollment that we talked about earlier is the other thing. A couple of good fee years, and then the dedication of some county parks land or city property in the city of San Jose, that would change this scenario pretty quickly. So that is the 2018-19 annual report in a nutshell. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them for you, or deflect them if I can.
So I'm opening it up. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
I have a question. Can you just go back 1 slide?
Sure.
I'm curious, I would have thought that the fee funding would have been sort of commensurate with the impacts. Is that problem one of the things that the revised fee structure is intended to capture?
Commensurate with the impacts.
Yeah, with the number of entities incurring impacts and therefore paying the fees.
Oh, you mean that we, because we are where we thought we would be with impacts, but we're not where we are with fee funding.
Right.
That's a good question. That's a very good question.
Yeah, I can answer a little bit of that, Jerry. So Abby, part of that is what Bob was talking about, that we have land in lieu that hasn't been dedicated. So this would probably be closer to 10%.
Yeah, you take that 1.5 million, you're right, Ed, and you put it over in one of the, in this category in particular, this comes up over, we'd be over projected.
Got it, okay.
Good question though, Abby. Okay, back to the pretty tree. All right, I'm sorry if you
Yeah, I had a question.
Yeah.
Actually, a couple of really quick questions. As I was scrolling through the annual report, a couple of details kind of popped out to me that I was just kind of curious about. And that was, in the report, it said there was going to be a March 2020 release of burrowing owls that were captured. Did that just not happen? Was that deferred towards a later year?
I thought they were released. I know they were released last year. And one of those owls actually returned to the site this year. Do you recall, Ed? Was there?
Yeah. So there were, how many was it? 14 chicks that were,
Right. Yeah.
yes. 4 were orphan chicks and 10 were through our scientific collection permit that we have with the state. And those 14 chicks, one died, unfortunately, were raised by the Peninsula Humane Society. And all 13 of them were released. 10 of them were released at Shoreline, and the 3 of the 4 orphan chicks, which I believe they were all female, were released at the site they were taken, which was the El Viso near the regional wastewater facility. And we can have the owl people, we'll have them speak at the November meeting, and they can give you a real good presentation on all that. But yes, it's happening, and we're in the process right now of trying to get the permission to do a captive breeding program like they're doing in Southern California with the San Diego Zoo and Fish and Wildlife Service and others down there.
And it
Okay,
was
great.
encouraging to see that one of the owls did stay in the area, that one of them returned back to the regional water facility, the area that was originally acquired, raised in captivity, then returned back out to the wild. So that was nice to see this year.
And I know I believe all 5 nests, so they were set up hacking aviaries out at Shoreline. All 5 produced chicks. And there was another crop of 13 chicks that were taken this year to be raised in captivity again, and they will be released next spring. So 70% of the chicks die in the wild. So the thinking is, if you take a couple from each nest, depending on how many chicks they have, then it could lead to less competition within the nest and also a higher survival rate.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
Any other questions? So I just have a couple of comments. One is, thank you for the report. One of the things that sort of stood out to me is, as a public advisory committee member, we are supposed to, bring awareness to the public of the Habitat Agency's work. And I'm wondering if you have the capability, the budget, staff to either come up with an interesting infographic, or maybe just a 1 or 2 pager, something that we could put out there, whether it's through our own Facebook pages, whether it's through, the Habitat Agency has one, something that can relay this report and relay the good work, the positivity of where you're at. So that's just one comment. If not this year, maybe as you move forward, because the annual report itself is,
Long.
a wonky thing.
Yeah.
And you're not going to get anybody in the public aware of the good work that you're doing with that sucker. So if you could maybe, if there could be some thought, like I said, if not this year, then maybe think about that down the line. Package up your last 5 or 6 years and what that looks like, and where you've gone. It's also,
I think that's a good idea, Julie. Thank you.
Yeah, Ed and I have talked about taking a more streamlined approach to the annual report, really focusing on those things that are essential. It's a big document. It's painful to write. It's painful to read. We've done pretty well with at least making the presentations a little more brief and colorful. I think, what you're talking about largely, what can be expressed in the PowerPoint presentation is very helpful for the public to see. But what sounds like what you're getting at more is an executive summary.
Exactly. Something that's really very, very tight, easy for the public to really see and understand and get the good work you
It's
do.
a very good point. I ran the implementation committee meeting earlier today, and they were very appreciative of kind of understanding what we are doing with the money. They need to explain to people they're collecting fees from where the money's going. And so if I can show them pictures of properties that we picked up, land management actions, now that we're picking up more property, the story is much easier to tell. We're building a legacy out there in the landscape, and it's easy to portray and convey that now. The first few years of the plan, we're just pulling in money and pulling out our hair, trying to make acquisitions happen and get restoration going. But now we've got quite a bit behind us now. There's a tailwind. And so I think it's a great time to do exactly what you're saying. I've talked to Ed about also updating our website, making it a little bit more user-friendly. Maybe instead of an image of one lake that we don't have in our reserve system on the front page, although it's pretty, maybe we have a rotating images on the top of all of our different reserve system properties and some of our restoration projects. So these are parts and parcels of what we're trying to get done in the coming years.
Great. I'm glad you're thinking about it. Yeah, it's, even for the elected officials, like you said, who sit on the governing board and some on the implementation board, it's getting across and having people care about what the agency does. It's not easy. So if you can have something that's really bite-sized, that has some great imagery and a couple, like I said, good stats that just tell a simple but strong message, it's the way to go.
That's great.
Great idea. We've done it with electeds in Sacramento and Washington. We have a 2-pager. We could do a 2 or 4 pager that could focus on the things that you and Jerry are talking about, and we do have the budget for it. So yeah, I think it's a great idea. Hadn't thought of it, at least related to the annual report. I hadn't thought about, because I think East Contra Costa, their plan does do something like that for their annual report. I think they do a slick document.
Yeah, well, I know you can do better than East Contra Costa.
Thank you. Yeah. We have an endowment. They don't. So we're already doing
There
better.
you go. There you go. You have a big leg up right there. Just a couple of comments with regards to, it speaks to one of the slides or a couple of the slides, but also just in the report when we're talking about, you were talking about the major, most project impacts happening in the developed area. While I don't disagree with it, with the way it's sliced up, if you just sort of look at rural lands, putting agricultural and natural lands together, although natural lands are obviously the priority for the Habitat Agency, we unfortunately are seeing still that really it's the rural lands that are still taking the hit at 57% of the impacts versus 43% of the developed, urban lands. And but on the upside, I would say that, with the 58% of the total projects I was looking at were private, so that's great. Same thing, 54% of the urban development projects, you got to that chunk of the 289. But again, like I said, there's kind of that, the worst part is though, even though there were 34 rural development projects, which really represents 12% of the total, the 289. Like I said, when you look at what you've got, that 12%, yet when you're looking at rural impacts, taking ag land and taking natural lands, they're taking the biggest chunk of the hit, obviously, because that's where our interests are at in terms of what we're trying to protect. So just a small comment on that. There's this sort of this push and pull of positive and negative when you're looking at the stats of all that.
Yeah, good point.
That was just a comment. Anyway, that was all I had to say. I just wanted to make sure there was someone else again. Ed, did you want to add anything?
No, I'm just thanking you for your comment.
And if we are done with our comments again. Opening up public comment, closing public comment.
Oh wait, Ed's cat. I think Ed's cat had a comment.
Yes, yeah. She's complaining that there's not enough grassland left for her to.
We're doing our best.
Yeah, it's never good enough for Brenny, I can tell you.
Oh. Okay, well then, if there are no further questions or comments, close this item. And I believe we are now on to the officer's report, the executive
Yeah.
officer report. Do I have that right?
Fortunately, I had this document up when the S drive went south on me, so I will share it.
I'm gonna jump off now, Ed.
All right, bye, Jerry.
I
Thank
know
you.
everything you're about to
Thank you,
say.
Jerry.
I can
Thank you for
smell dinner
your
cooking.
presentation.
All right, thank you, everyone. Take care.
Sherry, nice to see you.
Bye-bye.
Hey,
Let me share the file here. That's not working. I guess Angie doesn't seem to want to let me share.
Just a sec. It says that you should be able to.
Okay. Let me just try. I know during the governing board meeting, I didn't have a problem. Yeah, when I click on it, it just comes up with a whiteboard. I don't know.
Do you already have the item open?
I do, yeah.
It usually brings up whatever you have open available.
Yeah, it's not doing
You
that.
know,
Maybe.
one of us can share it and give you control.
Okay, thank you.
I can do that. Here.
It was embedded in an email. I don't know if that's the problem. Thank you. Perfect.
Let me see.
I can have you scroll down too, if sharing with me.
I think I just gave you permission to control my screen.
Okay,
There you go.
great. Yep, got it. Thank you.
Sure.
So this is the fiscal year 2020 budget update. So that's last fiscal year. And you can see what we projected in terms of expenses. And our projection was a little over 4 million spent to date, almost 3 million remaining, almost 1.2 committed. That means things that their invoices pending, a little over 700,000 anticipated balance. So we look like we'll be spending $470,000 less than we projected for fiscal year 2020. From the revenue side, we had projected $4,075,000, as I noted in the previous presentation I gave. We're estimating that our revenues will be 3 million, almost 3.5 million. So not terrible, considering back in March, I was expecting our revenues to be around 2 million. So there were some projects in Morgan Hill. There was another portion of Glen Loma in Gilroy. And, you know, to your point, Julie, some of those projects are impacting what one would call fallow ag land. So there is that conversion of land that was once ag to rooftops. Grant revenues for fiscal year 20 are at a little over 13 million, and that reflects the $10 million Section 6 grant that we were awarded a grant funds from the Moore Foundation, and also grants we got to do restoration work. So on the endowment side, to date, we have invested almost 2.9 million, 2,875,000 into the Community Foundation Social Responsibility Fund. And the balance as of July 29th, 2020, that reflects when I had to get this guy done. I didn't check today to get this report to you, was 3,026,712. So at least we're in the black. When COVID hit originally, we put a suspension on further contributions. We lifted that suspension towards the end of May, given the stock market's on its own kind of solar system, its own universe, not tethered to reality. But we talked to Bob Spencer about it. We talked to the investment analysts at the foundation, and it was quite an eye-opening conversation where they said most of the gains in a mutual fund account happen, over a period of time, can be traced to a handful of days where there were huge increases. And I'm sure the reverse can be said for losses. But it's the same thing that I'm sure you hear from your 401k investment analysts, that given that this is a fund balance, that it is truly a long-term investment. We have another 44 years. It made sense to lift the suspension. The stock market didn't bottom out, so we started reinvesting into the foundation at the end of May. And if there's any questions, please jump in. So from an advocacy standpoint, we're working a lot with our consultant that we contribute, along with several other HCP, NCCPs, money to environment and energy consultant. And we've been having several meetings with them on, there were quite a few proposals to do a sustainability bond that was going to be focused on climate change. Those have been pulled. So now there's a focus on a Hertzberg bill. That's a stimulus bill. There's another with Tang, who's a representative out of San Francisco, where they're talking about trying to spend some of the future cap and trade money now. And we're trying to make sure that the stimulus bill would have money for restoration projects, because we view those as job creators, and that anything related to GGRF would consider natural lands as a potential area where that funding can go to mitigate for greenhouse gas impacts. There were several bills that we're focusing on. The most important one was the Garcia bill. And we've been working with our partners in Riverside County and Coachella Valley to lobby Eduardo Garcia to include $95 million for NCCPs. The Great American Outdoor Act is now law. I anticipated, I guess I was going out on a limb, not really, with Trump signing it just the other day. So the Land and Water Conservation Fund is now will now automatically fund the Section 6 program, meaning we do not need annual appropriations. It still could mean lobbying to ensure that there's adequate funding for Section 6, but at least we don't have to go through the appropriations process every year, which was painful and fraught with challenges. So the passage of this act, which is going to benefit parks across the nation and a lot of the stuff that us in this on this call support, the National HCP Coalition has been pushing this for years. So on the land acquisition stuff, I'll just go over this quickly. We closed escrow. It's actually, Davison is 93.9 acres, and it's 2 parcels. We closed on February, just after our last PAC meeting. East Coyote Ridge, we closed escrow on July 24th. That's 1,526 acres adjacent to the existing Coyote Ridge. Tilton Ranch, we're going to WCB for them to release their federal and state funding at their August 26th meeting. Once that happens, the clock will be ticking, and we're expecting to close escrow sometime in September on that. We talked a lot about county parks and Calero. Conservation easement and management plan has been submitted to the wildlife agencies for their review. That's a big deal. I wasn't sure we were ever going to get to this day, but a lot of kudos go to Don Rocha and Lizanne Reynolds, who's the attorney that was working with us. And they put together what our consultant at ICF, Tori Edelman, and myself thought was a very good management plan for the site. And I'm cautiously optimistic the wildlife agencies will approve what we submitted. We're still trying to buy the Castle and Cook property in Coyote Ridge. It's the most bizarre process I've ever been involved with. I'll leave it at that. We have 4 other properties at various stages in the acquisition process. One of them, Abby, I got to tell you, is Pajaro Ranch. And Seth said to me earlier this week that he's in on co-acquiring it with us. So you're getting this before I even.
That's great news.
Yeah, and we're also amending our 2017 Section 6 grant to include this property and a couple others, so we can use federal funding to help acquire them too. So Mike doesn't even know this yet. So I sent Seth a copy of our conservation easement. So Jess, Seth is a rancher, Seth Netsky, Mariposa Ranch, open space meats. He does grazing of his cows in the Sierras as well as in this county. And he's been working with TNC for a number of years. And so us buying this property and then selling it to him with a conservation easement makes it affordable for him to buy it.
That's great.
A great outcome.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of near Henry Coe that we're in discussion with landowners over. Thank you.
Can I add one thing about Seth?
Yes.
Is that he, for the first time last year, he put his cattle in the riparian set-aside habitat restoration area to use them as a management technique to get rid of invasives and to help create space for the native plantings that we put in 2013, 14. And I haven't heard how well it went, but I really appreciate that that's a management technique that is possible there, given the way the infrastructure was put in by Alan Renz, who designed it. And I really hope that that will continue to be part of the management for the property long term, because I think it's a really important test case for cattle as a beneficial management technique, in long-term riparian habitat restoration.
Yeah, both him and Alan are the kind of ranchers that are really focused. We have shared objectives with them, and Justin Fields also. They understand that it's a multi-benefit landscape and working collaboratively managing it. So I'm looking forward to working with him long term. And that's it, Julie. Thank you.
Thank you. I was waiting for you to unshare. All right, so we've sort of come to the end of the agenda. For future agenda items, we did talk at the beginning. Angie, did you capture that? That's sort of the next steps as part of the future agenda items, we would have a report back?
Yes, and were you going to add to draft a letter?
No, I don't think we're at the point of drafting a letter. I think we wanted a report back, and then we would discuss if any further action might be necessary and what that action might be. It will just wait and see how we progress with the issue.
Okay.
So usually Walt at the beginning of the meetings offers up opportunity for members to make any announcements that they feel would be appropriate. I didn't have a chance to do that, or not, I skipped over it, it's my fault. I'm just a beginner, you know. Is there anything anybody would like to add or comment on with regards to just sharing anybody else with the members here you might think is relevant? No, you guys are all ready to just meeting button.
Yes. I'm not sure it's relevant, and I apologize because I know everybody wants to go. I've been on Zoom meetings all day in week 2, and my toddler finally pushed my camera over the edge, so I apologize to everyone for not being able to join this properly. I just had a question for Ed. I'm just curious, and maybe it was brought up in the last meeting, you know, given the federal order about Anderson Dam,
Yes.
and I'm just wondering what involvement, if any, the HCP has in that, or what effect, anything that is related to that.
Yeah, that's a good question, Jake. So most of the activities
Valley.
through that emergency order are covered by the habitat plan, which is good for Valley water.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the fish are not covered by the plan, so it's not baked in. So there's a lot of negotiations between NOAA Fisheries and Valley Water on how to handle impacts to fish. But everything that's being proposed with the dewatering, well, I guess there's the big dewatering for the construction project, and then there's this emergency order drawdown, as they're calling it. That's all the activities that are associated with both actions are covered by the habitat plan, and it was anticipated that these various actions would be covered. There has been back and forth about fish relocation into Penitentiary Creek and what potential impact that could have on the native amphibians that are in there, red-legged frog in particular. So the Fish and Wildlife Service biologist has had some questions about that. There aren't a lot of fish in Coyote Creek, unfortunately, steelhead at least. So, and at least with this drawdown, they're only talking about relocating the steelhead. There may not be any that show up, but so that's and we attend the meetings. Two groups of meetings we participate in. One is with all the regulatory agencies, and the other is with the larger group, which includes Valley Water and all their staff and consultants.
Okay. I was just curious what the HCP involvement was in that process, if there was any.
Yeah, it's a fee paying activity.
Okay. That's all I had. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Our condolences to you, Jake. Hopefully you can get yourself.
Yeah, no, it's we also decided to get a dog doing this. So we have a puppy and a toddler, and yeah, between the two of them, everything's kind of falling apart.
I'll trade you my 2 teenagers.
Yeah. I think I'll stick with the toddler right now. It's only one of them.
Good choice. I'm going to make just a small announcement. So we do not dip our toe really much into San Benito County, but we are paying attention at least to what's going on just on the other side of the border with the Strata Verde initiative, you know, and how that might have an impact with, of course, potentially the wildlife corridor, as we're trying to work with others to protect Eurostack, Sargent Ranch. And related to that, just kind of excited that this year our annual signature fundraiser, which is happening in September, we're honoring Valentin Lopez, who is the chairman of the Llama Mutsun. And this year we're actually we'll have Uismak, which is, they are Native American singers, as well as we're gonna have Ozo Motley. And for those who don't know, they're a Grammy Award winning group, and really excited. And there is also another huge name that we will be announcing in about a week and a half. And I'm really excited about that person because he harkens back from my homeland of Canada, very well-known singer, songwriter. Never thought we'd get him, but we did. And so we're really excited, but we're not allowed to say anything until we do everything through his manager. But really excited about that. So if you're interested, look out for it. It's all on our website except for this latest announcement will come in about a week and a half. But yeah, pretty stoked for this year's Nature's Inspiration, of course. And a portion of all our ticket sales and our sponsorships will go to the Llama Mutsun, the Tribal Band and Land Trust. So.
Cool. Is it a virtual event?
Of course, yeah. Totally virtual event. So.
Please send invitations. Normally, I think we sponsor it as an organization, but I don't know that I've heard of anything about it this year. So I would love to participate as an individual.
Yeah, I will send you something along. Yeah.
Great, thanks.
I saw something from Megan, but yeah, please send it along to all of us.
Okay, sure. If you're all interested, I will. And then when the big announcement comes out of this performer, then I'll be sending that along as well.
Fully expect it's Justin Bieber, right?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, he's Canadian? I didn't know that.
Oh,
So
yeah. And clearly Julie has loved him since her time.
Stop reminding us.
all my years I've been trying to blame Canada for something. Now I got it.
You're making me think of that South Park Blame Canada song.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, back to the serious. Thank you everyone so much for being here. I am glad
I just had one thing to add.
Oh, please.
This is Jan. So you may already know this, but the Open Space Authority did decide to put a measure on the November ballot simply to extend the parcel tax that was, the ones called Measure Q.
Yes,
no
with no sunset.
But to, just extend the term essentially with no sunset. So that's it.
Yeah, our board will be voting on that next week as to whether to support it or not, but I'm pretty sure we're going to be all in.
I'm pretty sure Nature Conservancy is also.
Yeah. Any other comments? Thank you, Jan, for bringing that up, as well as the process, the slow rollout process for the North Coyote Valley public input into that process. They've just rolled out a survey that's on their website. That's going to be this. They're doing a soft rollout, and then they'll go for full board, I think, in about a couple of months as well. But that has begun. They're starting to take public input via their website. There's a brief 7-question survey, of which really 3 of them are meaty questions. The ones are just real easy stuff to answer. But yeah, that's out there right now. Anything else? No? Okay, well, as I was saying, very happy to see us all healthy. I'm sorry that Walt wasn't with us. I hope everything's okay with Walt. Ed, I guess you'll let us know.
Yeah, I had a little communication with him a couple months ago, and he seemed fine then, but I do not know what's going on now.
Okay, yeah, because he's usually with us and usually reports, so want to make sure he's okay too.
Okay,
All right.
I'll reach out to him. Yeah.
Thank you, everyone. Angie, is there something I
That is-
can do to officially sign off and close this meeting, adjourn it?
No, that was it.
Thank you so much, everybody. Thanks for putting up with this super novice at running meetings.
Good meeting you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Bye, thank you.